Hello and welcome. My name is Tom, and this is The Enthusiasm Project, where I am currently documenting my journey and starting a business. And that's where we're going to take off today. If you downloaded this episode, then you've probably noticed that the title says Smarts and Ignorance. And that is, I think that's really appropriate. So I'm going to kind of explain that a little bit, and then we will dive into it a little bit. So here's what I mean by smarts and ignorance. I like to think of myself as not a dumb person, but definitely in some areas, like starting a business, a bit of an ignorant person. And to just be completely honest and open, talking about, business things and starting a business over the past few weeks on this podcast has sort of been, it's like brought up these weird insecurities because I feel like I'm super unqualified to talk about those things. And that's why I feel really good when Heather's in here, because I just feel like it adds some experience and some legitimacy to what I'm saying. But I also feel like, when there's people that have established businesses and they understand the process and all those things, that me sitting here talking about my plans, it just doesn't seem like it's on the same level. I think that's something I just need to get over mentally. And I think that deciding to work with Heather to make this happen in a really specific way is a good way to do that. But I also, I don't want to give the false impression that I think that it's an easy thing to do and it's just sort of like all sunshine and rainbows, because obviously, like, I know the struggle. I mean, I live with someone who is, who has been working on building their own business, and I see the ups and I see the downs and everything in between. But really, what it kind of comes down to is, as I mentioned in a previous episode, for me personally, there have been these revenue streams that have been starting to come in, nothing major, but just enough to kind of get my attention and go, I should probably do something about this. And that is kind of what led it to being possible to approach the idea of starting a business, and then figuring out the structure of that and deciding to work with Heather to form an LLC is kind of the first way of establishing that, to just build that foundation, or to create that foundation that we can build on in the future. And oh boy, there's so much that goes into it. Yesterday, Heather and I were talking, and one of the things that popped up was we sort of started talking about college, and I was talking about this same idea that I'm sharing with you now, and I was thinking about going to college. So, I personally started at community college because I didn't know any other options, and it was affordable, and I still think it's an amazing way to go for like most people. And then from there, I transferred to a Cal State school, and then from there I went to a graduate school for my teaching credential, my master's, and then eventually I ended up going back to a Cal State school to get a second teaching credential. So there's a lot of school, which sounds so simple when you say it just like that. But, that was 7 or 8 years of life, and I just remember being at the end of that and thinking, on my first day of college, walking to class, if I had known what was ahead, there's no way I would have done it. But being at the end of it, I was very happy to have done it. And that's sort of like, that's a difficult thing to rectify in your brain, the idea that I'm so glad I did this thing, but I would never want to do it again. Or if I knew better, I would never have done it. And it just sort of popped the idea in my head of sometimes ignorance can be a good thing, not willful ignorance where you refuse to learn more. I guess that's just stupidity. But, sometimes you need to be a little bit naive in order to do things that otherwise any sensible person would say, no, you should not be doing this thing. And obviously, like for me personally, financially, like I have a job that pays decently enough. I have no complaints about my pay. I get great benefits. I have a really good schedule. What more do you need than that? Like, I mean, honestly, there would be nothing wrong with just doing that and, doing my 5 days a week and enjoying lots of other time off and just sort of kicking back and, all those years at school, just enjoying the fruits of that labor. But there's also just the idea of, well, 30 years of that or 35 years of that doesn't sound ultra fulfilling. And so what else is there? And I'm always just a super, not distracted, but there's just always a bunch of different things I want to try. Like I always feel like there's not enough time in the day to do all the things. And that's where, having a million different hobbies comes into play. That's where starting a YouTube channel comes into play. That's where wanting to start a business on the side, comes in, all that stuff where it's like, why are you throwing more onto your plate when it's already full? I don't know how not to do that. But most importantly, I feel like if I don't do it, I would regret not doing it in the future. And this week, there were just a few things that happened that kind of they're like stories I want to share. They're good things. It sort of sounds like a bad thing the way that I said that, but things that just got me thinking about the importance of not knowing you can't, which enables you to be able to do things. And I just want to share them because I enjoyed them. I shared them with some of my students. I shared them with Heather, and they're just good stories because one of them is sort of a bigger story and one of them is a smaller story, but I think they both illustrate the larger point that I'm getting at. The first one, well, actually, to kind of chronologically do it, there was just a little thing that happened at school in one of my classes one day this week, which isn't really an uncommon type of thing to happen, but for some reason, this specific instance just stuck out to me. And I came home that day sort of feeling really inspired by it and motivated by it. And I was talking to Heather about it, and it just happened to be the same day that Greta Thunberg was named Time's Youngest Person of the Year, which, a lot of people were really excited about. Some people weren't as excited about. But wherever you stand on that issue, very interesting that someone so young could be named to such an influential position. And so I was sort of looking more into her story, and I found a news piece from VOA News, which just sort of explained her story, and part of it also included sort of a description of how she got started with her whole cause, which if you're familiar with her story, that's probably not new news to you, but I feel a little guilty in saying that I wasn't super familiar with it. She was sort of on my periphery. I knew the basics, young person, climate change, very active and outspoken, but I didn't know kind of where she came from or her origin story. So here's a little clip from that news piece.
Thunberg began her campaign in 2018 by protesting outside the Swedish parliament once a week instead of going to school. She quickly drew the world's attention with her bold speeches accusing people in power of endangering future generations by ignoring the science on climate change. Thunberg has become a keynote speaker in nearly every major climate forum, including the United Nations, and has inspired young people around the world to stage massive protests demanding action on climate change. But her message is not universal.
The interesting thing in that is that it talks about Greta's story starting in 2018. And obviously she had to have had opinions and thoughts and ideas about this issue prior to then. But what's interesting to me is that a year ago in Christmas time 2018, she probably didn't expect to become Times Person of the Year 1 year later for Christmas of 2019. And how on earth did that happen? If you told her that's your goal, you have to be Times Person of the Year. There's how would you achieve it? There's no way you could achieve that goal. But she just sort of did a thing that caught a lot of people's attention. And, it starts out so simply with just instead of going to school one day each week, she went and did a protest, which is not an uncommon thing for people to do protests outside of government buildings, but probably because of her age and her ability to speak on her issues so well. And those two things combined, it got attention. And then she was able to be catapulted into this position where she became a figurehead and a leader for this cause. And it just, everything just sort of exponentially snowballed from there. But a big part of it is I don't think anyone ever told her she couldn't. And I mean, literally, her parents obviously were okay with this idea of their child being politically active, but nobody told her she couldn't make an impact and couldn't make a change. She just felt strongly about something and then did, what she thought she could or should in order to to do something about it and in order to take action. And I think that is really important. And to, that's on a huge scale. It's literally being named Person of the Year. You're making, global news. You're getting you're getting criticized by people in very high political positions on social media. That's larger than what most of us will encounter. And so to kind of counteract that, the thing that happened before that at school was just sort of a smaller version of almost the same spirit. Less serious, but the same spirit, which was, I have a student in one of my classes who maybe a year or two ago got really into using the Novation Launchpad. And if you don't know what a Launchpad is, it's this square piece of equipment. It looks like a sound pad, basically. It's like a MIDI controller, and it has these these kind of like rubbery pads on it. I think it has like 64 pads. And each one is just a trigger for a sample. So you can program it in any number of ways. But one really common and popular way that people use the Launchpad is they push the button, and then the button will trigger a sample from a song, and it will also trigger a sequence of lights because each pad can light up. It can change colors, brightness, intensity. One trigger can make multiple pads light up, whatever you want. And so people put these light shows on. So if you go through YouTube and you search up like Launchpad cover or whatever, you'll kind of see what people do. And some of it is absolutely amazing. It looks like they're just hitting buttons on a thing, but they have to really carefully cue each beat of a song to make it play smoothly. And then each thing triggers part of a light sequence that creates all these different shapes. It literally is like a light show. It's crazy. It's good. It's just really cool. And so anyway, one of my students, we got some Launchpads in for school because they're interesting as triggers, but you can also use them to trigger not just audio, but video. And so sometimes if you go to concerts and there's like projectors and things in the background and all kinds of crazy overlays are happening, sometimes that can be connected to a Launchpad and someone can literally play video clips almost like an instrument. It's really cool. So I wanted us to start kind of diving into that. But anyway, this student, got into Launchpad covers, and then he got a Launchpad of his own. He actually started up a YouTube channel where he does Launchpad covers, which is not, he's involved in 8,000 other things on campus. It's not like a career goal or anything, but he's doing extremely well on his YouTube channel. He's, networking within that community. He's a senior this year, so he's graduating. I think it's just been an overall amazingly positive experience, and I'm like so proud of it. But he started just by doing these covers. You can download the song files, which include not only the song, but all the samples for the song, and then all the light triggers. And then you load them into the software on your computer, and you just have to learn, basically memorize which buttons to hit when. And I don't know how you do it because these crazy sequences, but he does it, and he does it really well. And that's cool. And that has been kind of enough to just sort of be where he's been for a while. But now he has started to create his own covers, which basically means you find a song and you have to chop it up beat by beat, which, in a standard song, there are like hundreds and hundreds of beats. So it's just like seconds of the song or fractions of seconds. And each time then he assigns it to a pad. Every time he presses a pad, it hits that part of the song. He can dissect out pieces of the song, so maybe like a bass hit or a snare hit, and then he can do 2 pads to kind of keep the rhythm going and do remixes. It's crazy. Like, I barely understand how it works. And then he's also coordinating that with the light sequences. So you push the buttons and it triggers different lights. I think I'm going on about Launchpads a little too long, but they are really cool. And watching someone literally just for the joy of doing it, learn how to do all this stuff and put in the time, energy, and effort to do it it's just, I love it. Like, it makes me so happy and motivated, and it's genuinely inspiring to me to see that. And so he was working on that one day in class. He was working on that, and we do our daily broadcast, and a couple of the students wanted to do like a holiday special. And I was like, yeah, we can do that, like the old super cheesy 70s and 80s holiday specials where everyone's in like a house and, someone knocks on the door. And it's like, who's that? And it's it's like a guest star or whatever, like putting together a really cheesy holiday special. And I said, oh, it'd be cool to have like a different intro song. We have our intro song that we use on our broadcast at school every day. And I was like, we need kind of a different version of that. And I didn't mean for them to make their own, but one of my students said, oh, I'll work with, the guy that does the Launchpad things, and we'll make a song. I want to do like this synthy cover with like sleigh bells and the whole thing. And I was like, oh, okay. And the song we normally use is actually just the A-Team intro from the old show, which is like perfect for a news broadcast intro. And within, I don't really know how they did it, but within 20 or 30 minutes, they had, a couple measures of that song already done out in a totally different original style. And I walked over, I was like looking at them at their workstation. I was like, I genuinely thought they had put the song into some software, like converted it into a different style. And like, no, we're just doing it by ear. And, both of them have musical backgrounds, but neither of them is like a trained musician or anything. They just kind of brute forced it. And I was like, you seriously, like in 20 minutes, you figured out how to do a song from scratch that actually sounds like a cover of the original? And they're like, yeah, we'll just do the rest later. I was like, okay. Because I know that from my point of view, just as an adult, if someone told me, yeah, I need you to create an original cover, record it, compose it, put the whole thing together for this intro thing, I would just say no. Because no, that's insane. Like on top of the production, on top of the filming and the editing or whatever, like you want me to now do original music production? I can't do that. I'm one person. There's not enough time. A million excuses. Because I know what goes into that. I know what it means if you tell me you have to produce an original piece of music. I know like the pain and the work and the time that goes into that. But these guys didn't know that. They're smart, intelligent people, but they hadn't really had that experience yet. All they knew was they could figure it out. And so they did, and it didn't stop them. And I know it's like a weird comparison to another teen who's, leading an environmental movement across the entire world. But I think that they're both similar in that you take a bit of intelligence and you mix it with motivation, and you take away the barrier of I can't, or it's not usually done, or this isn't typical, or whatever. And then you just sort of unlock a lot of extra possibilities. And, that's one really specific story from the classroom. And as exhausting as my job can be, I could probably find a lot of those little stories which are really motivating. And it honestly reminds me of being in high school when like, Web 0.1 or Web 1.0 or whatever it was called. And, all the cheap like GeoCities and Angel Fire websites were out. And I just remember my friends and I like, we need to make a website for like something for a band or whatever. And we would, try to put together like a quote unquote band that we were in, and then we would build a website for it, and we would upload music that we made and all this stuff. And it just felt so, I was so refreshing and like invigorating, and we didn't know any better, and everything was exciting. Every tool, everything we encountered just opened up a new world of possibility. And I think that with time, with knowledge, with experience, your skills get sharpened. But that knowledge also brings some barriers because you start to know the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty, the not so great parts of that. And then I think it can make you hesitant to be willing to try those types of things. And so to bring that all the way back to the idea of starting a business, like how on earth are these things connected? I think that for me, it's important to acknowledge being in that position and that situation where I know I have a track record throughout my life of being able to figure things out and make stuff happen. But I also know that I'm entering into an area where I have very little experience and will likely make a lot of mistakes. And it's a situation where those mistakes can cost money, they can cost time, all that stuff. But I think being okay with that and sort of being aware of it, but pushing it to the back of my mind is important in order to be successful, to focus on what I want to do rather than all of the terrifying things that could happen. Focus on all the great things that could happen. And that's, now that we've had several episodes of talking about business, I kind of wanted to candidly explain my, I guess you would call it, not trepidation, because I'm excited for it, but my insecurity, I think, maybe for lack of a better word, and just my understanding and realizations that, yes, I know that, gosh, if you are like an established business owner, entrepreneur, and you listen to me talk, you must be like, oh, this poor guy, like, please just just stay in your lane, buddy. Like, don't do this. But again, like I said, the most important way to look at it is in the future, if I don't take advantage of these opportunities now, I know that I'll regret that. And even when it comes to work, like, I think one of the quickest things to do is to think, oh, you're starting a business. Like, clearly you want to switch jobs or leave or whatever. And that is not necessarily the case. I mean, there are a lot of people at my school site that have businesses on the side, whether there's, people do income taxes, people own a gym, restaurants, all kinds of things. It goes back to what I said in a previous episode or a couple previous episodes where I really do love my job and my career, and I worked really hard to get there. But I am, feeling tired and looking ahead going, okay, I could have, 15 or 20 more years of this, which could be terrific and rewarding. But I only want to do that if I actively choose to do that. I don't want to do that because I'm forced. There are so many people that I've met throughout my career who are, I've been doing this 30 years, 35, 40 years, and they are miserable, but they have no other choices. And I don't want to be in that situation. There are also people doing it for 30, 35, 40 years who are real happy because they love it. They would not want to do anything else. And I just want to make sure to keep all those options open so that I can actively choose to pursue the things that I want to pursue. And of course, just given my own personal track history, that's probably going to be more than one thing at a time. I've never only done one thing, and so having a career and having a business on the side really only makes sense. And then seeing where they go from there is something that I want to leave up organically because I'm completely fine, for the way things are right now, basically like the revenue that's coming in from my channel and some of those, brand deals and whatnot, just managing that more effectively and smartly, I'm happy with that. And then doing it in a way through an LLC that also allows Heather to manage her client work more effectively, I'm happy with that. And then that also allows the two of us to collaborate more effectively on future projects and things we want to do. Again, all really good things. It doesn't mean that you're pulling in 7 figures a year or anything necessarily. I don't want to close those doors. I want to keep those doors open. So that's kind of like my huge motivation for this whole push towards starting a business and seeing where it goes organically. And I think that's today. This morning, I came up with I just had a thought, and basically Heather and I had been thinking of starting another podcast, which is something totally unrelated to what we normally do. Like, we both want to jump completely out of our traditional areas and just try something different. But it's always scary when you try something different because you know that. Like, I remember making my first YouTube video. Heather told me, you're going to make that first video and you're going to think that it's good. And then you're going to look back on it and you're going to think, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. And I remember making my first video and thinking it was great. And it's fine. But I remember going like, I'm really proud of this. Like, I don't think I'm going to look back on this and think that it's bad. I cannot watch that video today. It doesn't mean that it's bad, but it definitely means that the style, the structure, the skill, all those things have developed with the experience, but there's no way you can get there without starting in the first place. It's just like a TV show. If you ever watched, take one of your favorite shows that's been on for a while, and then you go back and watch like the very first episode of the first season, sometimes it can feel like an entirely different show just because they just didn't have all the parts there. And it doesn't mean that they weren't spending a ton of money to produce this show. It doesn't mean that the cast and crew weren't talented and giving it their all. It just, stuff has to kind of be cooked for a while before all of the flavors pop out. And sometimes it can feel discouraging to start something new because you sort of know that, especially if you've been through it a few times, whether it's career, hobby, whatever, you kind of know that that's the way things go. You start and then you have to keep improving, and you kind of have to do things that aren't as good as you'd want to do so that you can end up doing the great things later on. But it's such an important part of the process. And I have gotten to a point, despite my constant anxiety about being alive and my, stress about different things and my drive towards my tendency towards perfectionism, I think I've done a really good job over the past several years of just learning to jump in and figure it out. And I can even relate that to this must have been like 6 years ago. In my old digital media program, we ordered our first drone. It was the DJI Phantom 2, which was, a bit bigger, definitely a lot clunkier than the modern drones that exist in today's marketplace. It didn't have all these crazy sensors. You could just crash it into anything. And I ordered this drone for my program. It was like our first one in the district, and it got delivered one day. And I was so I had read the instruction manual back to front, and actually I read it front to back because that makes a lot more sense. And I had learned all the controls, and I was very carefully, I didn't even want to take it inside. I had a big classroom over there, like a big space. And so I was literally not even flying it indoors because they weren't totally made for that yet. But I was just learning how to turn the motors on and off, and to start the camera and control the camera, and just all the practice behind it. And then the other teacher in my program came over into my room, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, the drone." He's like, "Can I see it?" And he grabbed the remote from me and just made it take off and fly around a little bit. And it kind of bumped into the walls and crashed a little bit. And I remember him going sometimes you just got to go for it. And I was just appalled. But I think of that all the time, because sometimes you really just do need to go for it. And it can be so tempting when you're starting something new, YouTube channel, podcast, business, anything, to kind of wait until all the pieces seem like they're perfect, but that's never going to happen. It's never going to be absolutely perfect. And then you're never going to start with day one, project one, episode one, whatever, and have it seem like it's episode 182, because it's not. You have to put in those reps to get there, but you can't get better until you get started. And that was the thing that popped into my head this morning, literally just as I was going about my day. That was what popped in my head. You can't get better until you get started. And I thought I'm not, I'm a Twitter novice, but I was like, this seems like something that should go on Twitter. And I thought of tweeting it, and then I was like, oh God, don't, because that's just one of those ultra cliche. If you look up the motivational people, or the hyper aggressive hustle culture people, they all post stuff like the best time to start is yesterday, the second best time is right friggin' now, that kind of stuff. And I'm just not totally into that. But then I was telling Heather about it, and she was like, you absolutely should share that. It's a good insight. And I think that it is important. So regardless of the Twitter aspect, you really can't get better until you get started. And I can sit here. It's already been a couple of years that I've had the idea in the back of my head to go you should start a business. You should start your own thing. You should, it's an investment in yourself. It's an investment in your own skills, not someone else's thing. But it's that resistance to go through that process that can be scary. And so that was kind of my determination when I started season 2 of this, was to go no, I just need to jump in and do it right now and make all the mistakes and be the amateur and be the novice and know nothing, and then figure it out and build, because, then I'll be at a point where I have the experience and I'm at a place that I want to be. And that kind of, just sort of knowing that you're going to make mistakes, but putting that in the back of your mind and just going for it the best that you can. Also trusting in yourself that you're a smart, capable person who's not gonna, you're not out to do anything evil. You're not out to make any dumb mistakes on purpose. So you're going to be very cautious. You're going to be intelligent and, practical, strategic about the things that you do, and just sort of jumping in and going for it, just grabbing the drone control and taking off instead of sitting there practicing on the ground forever, I think is a very, very valuable skill. And hopefully a good experience. We'll see in a year what I'm talking about on this podcast, if I'm season 3, all the regrets or whatever from there. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I wanted to use this as a chance to decompress after the past few weeks of this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, and plans. This is how we're building it. Sort of this is what's going on in my head. I am, considering all the angles, but this is why I think it's important to jump forward. So again, this isn't just, well, I mean, it did kind of start as a way for me to catalog my own thoughts, but I also hope that it's helpful for anyone who might feel similarly or might be considering similar things, which, recording episode 1 almost a year ago sounded crazy, but like I said earlier, in previous episodes, I've actually been getting feedback about this podcast, and that is amazing that you would give your time to listen and to share and to actually have it, spark something and to, start a dialogue or start some thoughts. And I have to confess that I feel terrible. I host my podcast on Anchor, it's a great platform. If you're looking to podcast, there's a bunch of different ways you can distribute it. I've been using Anchor just because it's so easy. You create an account, it's free, you upload your podcast, and Anchor can automatically send it out to all of the other services like iTunes and Spotify and Google and whatever else, anywhere else that you can get podcasts. I think mine's available on 9 different services, but I only have to upload the episodes in one place to Anchor, which is really cool. It sounds like an ad for Anchor. It is not. But Anchor has a really cool feature that I didn't know they had, and it's actually the ability to leave voice messages for people. And I have 3 voice messages, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. If I keep getting these, I would really like to share them on the show. And the first one, the reason I want to share these today is because I'm recording this on, I think today's December 15th. The first one is from August 7th, and I feel terrible that I just didn't know it was here. It was in my inbox. I didn't know it's there. The way that Anchor sets up its voice messages, you can't write back to the person. So you see their screen name, you can hear their message, but you can't like reply to them or anything. You can go to their page, I guess, but there's not even a direct link to go to their page and like leave them a message. So I want to make sure to acknowledge the people who take the time to do this. And the first one, the only name I have is it's Duh Media Man from August 7th. And I got this message and it was in my inbox. And honestly, it said, the title says, "Congratulations, thanks for being an influencer." And I was like, oh, this is just an Anchor ad. Like I thought it was just, how Tom was your first friend on MySpace. I thought this was like your first message on Anchor. It's just sort of like the Anchor ad. But it wasn't. It was from an actual human being. And I feel so bad that I didn't know about it. So I want to thank Da Media Man for sharing this message, and I'd like to share it with you guys right now.
Congratulations on season 1. I just recently started using Anchor myself and think it's a great tool, and I'm looking for different ways to make it more streamlined, more efficient. Right now I use an Apple with GarageBand to edit it so I can have an intro and an outro and some music in there and edit it. I saw your video on YouTube about the Rodecaster Pro and thought that might be an interesting way to go. It would definitely be more efficient and give you a lot more flexibility and a lot more options. I'd like to hear more about how you set up your system to record these podcasts, and more about the mics you use, and picking a subject to talk about. I'm glad to hear you out there and another person like me, and I wanted to let you know, keep up the good work.
So I really appreciate that message. And I am recording this on the Rodecaster Pro, which is how it's super easy to mix in. Again, this sounds like an ad, but it's not. Super easy to mix in all these different sound clips and different mics. I'm recording this on the Rode Pod mic. If you're wondering, I'm more than happy to do either a video or an episode or whatever that goes specifically into podcast workflow. But again, this message is like 4 months old, so I feel bad that I didn't even know it was there until now. But I appreciate that. And the thing that struck me the most about this was I'm in a room by myself recording this. It feels very isolated. I'm just sort of alone with my thoughts. But hearing someone say, like, literally things like season 1 and this and that, you're like, oh my gosh, like the things I say are actually leaving and going into the world, and you watch videos, and it's so refreshing and nice to see the other side of that, because I'm on this side, making a thing and recording a thing and editing or whatever, But to see the other side of where does it go and what is the impact that it has is hugely like mind-blowing. And so I appreciate that, but it's also just it's a crazy experience that I don't know how to put into words, but I'm really appreciative of. The next one, now that I learned how to do messages, I actually got one last week. This one is only from a couple days ago, from Eric Leslie, and it just says, "Thank you for the good content." So thanks, Eric.
Hey, Tom, how's it going? Just want to say hi. Thank you for putting out this podcast and your YouTube channel. All your content's really fantastic. And I just want to say hi and keep it up, man. See ya.
Well, thanks, Eric. Hi, I appreciate it. I appreciate the support. I definitely want to keep it up. I, again, just love knowing that there are human beings on the other side because it makes it feel a lot less isolating and a lot more like a conversation and a partnership. And that's just awesome. I do have one final message from a familiar voice.
Hi, Tom. This is your fiance, Heather, and I am currently watching you upload our most recent episode for your podcast. And I wanted to test out this voice message. Say hi.
Hi, I am right here.
Okay, bye.
And now I am also right here. So that was when I figured out I had that message that had been waiting. That was Heather and I kind of explored how the voice message thing works. So she tested one out, but it's really cool because she just used her phone and it sounded great. I don't know. The other two from The Media Man and Eric sounded great. I don't know if you guys are using your phones or what, but it's a really cool way to kind of bring in some extra voices and some other dialogue into a show. So if you want to leave a voice message, all you need to do is go to anchor.fm/enthusiasm. And right there should be a little button that just says voice message. And then you can record it and send it. And it just pops up right in my inbox. And these are like, it's such a cool, just little collection of things that really mean the world to me. So I appreciate that. I'd be more than happy to have your voice included on the show in the future, if that's something you want to do. And before wrapping it up today, talking about business, talking about these things, I don't know if anybody is enjoying the Gear of the Week segment, which I still don't have an official like music thingy for. But wow, I am enjoying it because I love talking about gear, and having an outlet to just sort of highlight specific pieces of gear without having to make a full-on YouTube video about it is awesome. I'm having like such a great time with it. So this week I did something which I haven't done in a while, and I bought a new video light for my studio. Crazy lighting. Lighting is really like audio. It's one of those things that for video, it's kind of underrated. People are always more excited to talk about cameras and lenses, but man, your lighting and your audio, almost more than anything, are what's going to help you up your production quality the fastest. And for a long time, I've been using this one really inexpensive video light I got on Amazon, which is great, and I loved it, and it works. I mean, it still works, but the little mount broke where it lets you kind of aim the light, tilt it up and down. It just sort of broke, and it's stuck in one position, which works great if I want it in that one position, but sometimes I want to move it, and now I just can't do that anymore, unfortunately. But I've had that light for a few years, and it was $85, so I definitely got my money's worth out of it. I still wholeheartedly recommend it. I'm sure it broke just because I was being dumb and did something wrong. But anyway, it was time to update my lighting, and so what I did was I got a Falconeyes, like, I don't know what you would even call it. I'll put a link to the model number. It's an 18-inch light, but it's an LED light that is like a flexible, it's almost like a mat. Like you can roll it up like a yoga mat, but it's light. It's a light. It's crazy. It's really cool. It was recommended to me by Gary, the everyday dad on Twitter. And I love this thing. So I record most of my videos in my studio room, which is just a spare bedroom in our house. And it's a good sized bedroom, but it's not huge. It's about, 14 feet, I think, by 13 or 14 feet. It's almost a square, which is fine for a bedroom, but I have like a lot of stuff because all these hobbies. There's all my camera gears in here, all my podcasting gears in here, a bunch of guitars. There's a full-on drum set. There's 3D printers. There's not a lot of space. It's definitely a bit of a cramped room. And having a big light doesn't really work. So when my old light started kind of broke a little bit. It does have a big softbox on it, which was kind of a problem. And then the sort of standard YouTube light nowadays is the Aperture 120D Mark II with the light dome on it. And we have some of those at work, and they are amazing lights. Like, I think I've talked about them before. Oh, really, really good lights, really beautiful. And so I borrowed one just to see what it would be like in this space, and it did not work at all because it is a way too big of a light, physically big, to fit in this room. And it was just like, I mean, the giant light dome ended up being like, 7 inches from my face and taking up 1/4 of the room, and it just didn't work. So, which is great because those are also kind of expensive lights. So I was happy to know that I wasn't going to need to spend that much money to get a new lighting setup. And then this light popped up by Gary on Twitter, and man, it is amazing. So again, the brand is Falconeyes. This light comes in a bunch of different sizes. I think there's a 12-inch, an 18-inch, a 24-inch, and a 36-inch version. And when you get it out of the box, it's just like this flexible LED panel. I mean, literally, it is like a yoga mat. Like, you can roll it up. It comes rolled up, but it can roll out. It's bicolor, so it can be warm, it can be cool, anything in between. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it just because it is flexible, and having a flexible light opens up all these crazy opportunities. And it's crazy thin. It does not get warm or hot, obviously, because it's an LED. But the back of it has Velcro on it, so you can put Velcro on like a wall. You can literally stick it to like any kind of fabric or like the roof of a car. So it's this really versatile light. It comes with a softbox, which is only, I'm looking at it right now, maybe about 5 inches deep, that just kind of like Velcros onto the back and then pops out, and you can put a diffuser on it that it comes with, and it has a honeycomb mesh grid that goes on it. It even has this thing, if you take the softbox off, it almost has like a China ball cover you can put on it to get really like I don't know what you would call it, a wide spread of really soft light, and it puts out great light. And the craziest thing is, I was very worried that it was not going to be big enough or bright enough. I mean, right now I'm sitting in this room that is crazy bright because I just I finished doing a video on it, and it's at 85%, and the light is being reflected off the ceiling, actually, so it's not even facing me at all. If you face it at you and you turn it up to 100%, it's like comical how we flooded our entire like living room kitchen area with ultra bright light with just this one light when I was testing it out. It's crazy. You take it out of the box, turns on at like 10%, and you're like, oh, this is really bright. And then you realize you have 90% more you can turn it up. It's great. I really can't recognize it. I can't recommend it enough, at least so far. And it has the option to use a V-mount battery, but it's cool. I'm definitely looking forward to using it more and then doing probably a more in-depth video on it because it works so well. It's not super duper cheap. It was a few $100 depending on which size you get and which accessories that come with it. I'll put a link to the exact one that I got down in the description, but my goal is, and based on, the people I know have used it and the reviews I've seen, it's one of those things that lasts a long time. And of course, in addition to brightness and quality of light, because it's so small, it just takes up like no space. And I love that because now this corner of my room that was taken up by a giant softbox is like open, and it just feels so much better and less cramped, but I still have the same quality of light with more options. Whew, that was almost as long as like the regular episode segment, but geez, I really like this light. So that is my gear of the week recommendation as we wrap up. Thank you again so much for listening. If you want to reach out to me, I'm at SodarnTom on Twitter and Instagram. You can always send me an email. Contact info is in the description for the podcast. And of course, I'd love it if you visited anchor.fm/enthusiasm and left me a voice message. I'd love to have your voice be part of this show. Until next week, thanks so much for listening.